Okay, welcome. Good morning, everyone. We'll get started with the webinar. A brief introduction. My name is Suresh Kupahali. I'm the head of products at Replicon. I've been here close to 10 years building the products and the cloud-based service that we deliver for our customers. Along with me, Raju Borison. He's going to demo our product towards the end of this webinar. Let's briefly review the agenda for today's session. Let's take a look at the professional services industry dynamics, the trends as demonstrated by the services maturity index done by SPI. We'll also take a look at what is profitability myth and get to the bottom of it. I will discuss through some of the best practices to break the myth, and we'll go through a customer case study as well as live demonstration, and about 10 minutes for Q&A towards the end. Okay, just a few housekeeping reminders. Everyone will be on mute during the presentation. Q&A will happen at the end of the webinar, and also you can submit questions in the questions text box. Okay. Having said that, let's take a look at the services dynamics today, right? SPI Research published their annual professional services maturity index a couple of months back, right? And the global services revenue is stalling, even though there is a global growth in terms of the professional services business, but the revenue is stalling. So it came down from 10.2% in 2015 to 8% in 2017. And this is the second time that since the last recession that this dip has happened. Both 2016 and 17 saw a decline in the overall revenue growth, right? Pressures on margin is increasing. There are multiple factors contributing to that. The number one being unemployment rate is historically low. It's about 4.1%, as published by the recent data. And obviously, when the unemployment is so low, there is increased competition for the resources, the required skill set. That obviously has a negative impact on the overall resource cost. The resource cost increased from over 7.8% in 2015 to about 9.3% in 2017. Obviously, with continued innovation and in efficiency as well as in innovation, it also has impact on the billings, right? There is intensified competition as well. If you look at the overall net new client revenue coming from, it came down from 29% in 2015 to about 24% in 2017. And if you look at the bid to win ratio, it dropped from 4.95 in 2015 to 4.8 in 2017, right? And also we have seen complexities in the billing contract. It's no longer a hourly rate based on a role multiplied by time anymore, right? There are a lot of factors are being considered, including milestones and performance targets tied to billing contracts, and that becoming hard to kind of model and manage during the service delivery, right? Obviously, there are new revenue recognition standards are put in place, ASC 606 and IFRS 15, that also has a compliance requirement that professional services companies have to cope up with, right? Having said that, right, with that services dynamics in place, now services businesses have to kind of realize that time is money, right? Even though it's a cliche, but if you look at professional services organization, the major cost is people's time, right? 60 to 80%, close to 80% in many cases, is for people's time or the resource cost, right? So let's take a look at the resource time available in any professional services organization, right? Every employee or a resource has about 2,080 hours. With about 500 employees, you have about 1,000,000 hours, and with 5,000, about 10 million, and about 50,000, we have about 100 million hours. If you look at the end of the year, what did we get out of these million hours is something that every organization should ask this question: where did this time go? What did we achieve from it, right? Did we monetize all the time that we had from the resources? That's a question that every professional services organization should ask, right? Obviously, professional services organization have a list of metrics that they rely on to run their business, like resource utilization, productivity, project margins, profitability, and forecast for the next upcoming business deliveries or service deliveries. But they pretty much focus on what they are billable hours, right? By purely focusing on billable hours, right, it provides a kind of a myth, right? Some projects may be profitable, so a few resources may be highly have a higher utilization rate, but they are not accounting for the whole truth, right? There are a lot of unaccounted hours, right? It has two issues, right? The unaccounted hours could be factor into many of these buckets, like traveling hours or non-billable hours or admin hours and those kind of things. But many times those are misclassified and doesn't make it to client billings, right? Obviously, this creates a significant issue for professional services businesses, right? Because organizations pay for 100% of employees' time, but are actually billing fraction of what they are supposed to, right? This creates a not accounting for 100% of the time and monetizing 100% of the employee time. Obviously, it creates a significant issue, right? And bringing visibility in the first place, right? How the time is being spent, how the time is being spent, and also what to do with it, right? Both are equally important. Bringing visibility, how that's the context, and also what to do with it once you know where the time is going is equally important, right? If you look at, if you don't have a system of record to accurately capture, catalog, and contextualize time without a system of record, what we call, it's hard to account for the time that goes, that employees have, right? In 1,000 people organization, there are 2 million hours. And if you're not able to account for all 2 million hours, obviously, it creates a significant issue, right? If you failing to account for this time, as well as consequently all the expenses that goes around with it, creates a perpetual myth, that business is profitable or a practice is profitable, right? That is at the core of this webinar. How do we bring visibility, and how do we account for it, and what are some of the best practices to kind of make sure that professional services organizations are able to run a profitable business? Let's look at some of the best practices. Number one, accounting for 100% of the time, and also make sure that the time accounted for has the right context, right? That's number one, right? This helps bring visibility, and also then helps to bring accountability subsequently. We'll discuss through that. What are some of the things that needs to be done? Number two is streamlining the quote to cash workflow, because right from opportunity all the way to the cash realized, right? Having a streamlined process to achieving that is equally important, right? Third is establishing and adopting a series of professional services, benchmarks, right? How you need to know where you stand, right? That is the fundamental in running a professional service business. Finally, continuous planning, plan and replan in real time is obviously a key factor in making sure that you're leveraging your resources, the employees' time more accurately and to the best of delivering the right kind of services and also get the maximum out of the time and maximum revenue from each of the customers you're serving, right? Let's look at accounting for 100% of the time, right? One of the last thing employees or researchers want to do is to kind of capture time and help companies to know how they spend time and what they did and how that needs to be monetized, right? To get around that, bringing in automated time harvesting for resource time and applying the context is probably one of the key steps that the professional services organizations have to look at, right? Without the context, it's very hard to kind of deal with what happened with certain activity or certain time that employee entered, right? A lot of manual steps that will be taken downstream, and also billing errors creep in, and it causes a lot of administrative overheads, right? Getting the right context obviously helps bring the visibility that going back to how the time being spent, right? That provides the visibility. Once you know how the time being spent, and also you can fix those inefficiencies. For example, if one of your resources is spending a lot of time in non-client hours, that needs to be questioned. Why? What's being worked on? Why it's not billable? Why it's not being billed to customers, right? Are there any issues surrounding that, right? So having that visibility, also fixing the accountability comes from getting the time capturing automated and making sure that those systems, the system provides the accurate context for use downstream, right? The PSA platforms, have to be conservative, who offer global organizational modeling, who have the mobile capability, support some of the advanced technologies with like artificial intelligence, support IoT interfaces and things like that, right? In today's professional services environment, there are multiple systems in play. There could be multiple ticketing systems from where the data needs to be captured in. There could be multiple devices that need to kind of feed the data to the systems, right? Having a heterogeneous environment for time collection and the context management, the systems have to support that. And majority of the cases, consultants or the professional services resources, they are field and remote, right? They should be able to use mobile and other kinds of channels to kind of capture and apply the context for consumption, for billing and other purposes, right? Having a global purview with a mobile AI and machine learning IoT interfaces, along with the APIs, right, are equally important so that disparate systems can be connected in to capture and manage and the time for professional services monetization. Finally, the businesses are evolving, right? Obviously, there are many purpose-built PSA solutions out there. The way that we look at it is that the PSA solution has to evolve to the needs of the organization and not the other way around, right? As the businesses change, the solutions have to be able to adapt to the needs and provide that platform capability, and also has to scale globally, right? Not a department level or a particular practice level, but on a global footprint, okay? Second one is streamline the quote to cash process, right? Having a well-defined opportunity to invoicing process is critical, right? Otherwise, many of the times it results in ad hoc processes outside the system. People resort to emailing Excel and other documents back and forth over email, and that's how the things are taken care of, right? Obviously, everybody will be working on their own view of the data, and that creates issues, right? It creates silos, it creates different facts or alternate facts, and certainly not a right model for a professional services organization to deliver the quality of service as well as generating revenue, for the quality of the service that was delivered, right? One of the fundamental issues that need to be dealt with is data errors, right? Data errors will result in adjustments and manual corrections downstream, but first and foremost thing that needs to be done is that fixing them upstream, right? And to do that, there needs to be business processes that needs to be put in place, approval workflows needs to be modeled so that data is corrected upstream and not compensated downstream with some corrections and adjustments, right? That is finally saying no to Excel bypass is absolutely critical as well, right? It's very habitual to take the data out and run it through email and other processes for convenience. But obviously, that results in a lot of issues. As I said before, it results in silos that needs to be dealt with. So having a platform that provides a ability to kind of define an end-to-end workflow and being able to model a business process workflow to manage data and other adjustment that goes on, fixing the data at source will help streamline the overall quote to cash process. Adopt services benchmarks. Obviously, one needs to know, where they stand. Having a baseline around their, connecting all the outcomes, connecting the time to outcomes, like the productivity, like utilization, profitability is fundamental. Establish certain KPIs. That's your baseline. Once you have the baseline, calibrate across your teams, across your practice, in a global organization, right? Use them to kind of drive collaboration in real time, not through Excel, right? Real time is critical, right? Because everyone is looking at the same set of data, same set of facts, and they can act and react based on what they see, not based on their own view of the data that they are working with, right? Finally, continuous planning, plan and replan, as we call, is will help to keep finger on the pulse of the service delivery, right? As in a growing business, continue to look at resource allocations, how the resources are being utilized, how can the resource adjustment could be made to accommodate the new businesses coming in as the services delivery are getting done on the current projects. I think having that continuous view is going to be helpful, right? Right, planning from the opportunity stage. As an opportunity pans out, what are the resource needs and what are the skill required for this project delivery? How do we accommodate based on the existing resource map we have? Should we onboard or offboard? Those kind of decisions will help. Working with the real-time data, it will help kind of manage this much more, in a better way than doing an offline model, right? One of the fundamental issues that we have in a services business is what we call the hidden bench. Hidden bench is that, resources appear to be busy, but they are not generating revenue, right? Obviously, they are filling in time for the projects where they're being allocated to, but they may not be delivering on billable activities, right? Obviously, looking at those, as I said, going back to the context, this is where the context will help as well, unraveling that mystery of whether the resources are being really used for revenue generating activities or just being used as fillers, right? That's where the hidden bench comes along. If there are hidden bench capacity, can we realize that? Once you realize that, can we reuse them for other projects? This is where the real-time data will help, because you will have visibility to how the resources are being utilized on a project, billable or non-billable activity. That will actually help us to kind of mobilize resources, instead of onboarding new ones, right? So the classic hidden bench is, one of the problems that we are seeing in professional services industry. Can be addressed through continuous planning and replanning with working with the real-time data, right? Having gone through some of these best practices, obviously, there's a new way thinking to run a professional services business. Replicon has been working at it for the last couple of years. How do we kind of help model a solution to manage this overall professional services delivery from end to end, right? Um, you need to have a system that is built around the concept of time, right? Just like the ERP is built around money, time is at the core of Replicon PSA. We call it as time intelligence platform, right? The time intelligence platform, facilitates uh, time harvesting from structured and unstructured sources through mobile, AI, and IoT interfaces. We have a huge array of web services that are published to tap into any data source that is out there. And it provides data classification, intelligent classifications through AI technologies that are built into it. We have, built this platform to scale on a global basis with a global footprint, right? Um, Along with the time intelligence platform at the core, there are five pillars that support the professional services automation solution, starting with service delivery through managing resource utilization, providing a healthy project accounting health dashboards, providing tools for growth management, and finally revenue management. I'll briefly go through these pillars so that you get the context of what they offer and how they work in concert to provide a unified solution built on the core of our time intelligence. Service delivery, it orchestrates opportunities through resource mobilization, project planning, project tracking, and delivering the services to our customers, right? And it has a built-in business process modeling engine to model the way that you want the services to be delivered, right? So, resource utilization module supports setting up billable targets and measuring the utilization the way you want it, right? How you want, the utilization needs to be measured, and also it provides ways to kind of manage skill sets that are needed at the resource levels. Project accounting is a way to look at health of a project, health of a practice, health of a team, service delivery team at any point in time at different scales, right? Looking at, once you have established key performance indicators like the billing or the work in progress or the profit margins, comparing them to budgets, estimates, and the resource cost, that gives you a sense of whether you are running a profitable business or a runaway project or a project that is losing money, right? Provides you a real-time health of the projects or the practice at any point in time. Growth management, as I said before, it helps you plan incoming projects and help resource mobilization, either through uncovering, some of the hidden bench issues that may be there already, or through planning for resources, onboarding or offboarding processes, and looking for resources based on certain skill sets that are needed, right? So service delivery, resource utilization, and project accounting and growth management are the four pillars project managers will use to plan and orchestrate the end-to-end service delivery. And obviously, once you have delivered the service, the important aspect for services organization is to make sure that you're getting paid for the purpose. So we have a comprehensive revenue management platform. It is a completely scriptable platform to support the nuances that are out there, right from billing contracts through revenue recognition. Let me start with the billing contracts. In the newer, as I discussed during the dynamics, right? In today's world, client contracts or billing contracts are becoming more complex. They are no more based on just the resource rates or a role-based rates, right? They're becoming more complex, based on milestone and a combination of performance target tied to it. And obviously, that changes from every organization to organization. Having an ability to kind of model any complex contract is required. That's why we have to think of it as a platform, not as a purposeful built solution. So we have the ability to kind of define any kind of contract that needs to be modeled and apply that in the billing process. we have built a what's called a billing workbench that has a scriptable interface as well to generate billing entries based on the contract, consolidate them, even either build them or defer or making adjustments, go through that process, and even put through an approval process, right? This is where the project manager, finance manager collaboration comes into a picture, right? This is not, if you look at in many organizations, typically those approvals happen outside of the system. They have to actually go through some of the discounting processes that go through emails. Finance managers will question why such and such a discount has been made. Project managers will give some reason, and they go through and establish everything outside of it. But here we have to think of doing that in the product so that there's complete traceability, so that you can embed a business process approval flow into it. And obviously, once the billing collaboration followed by, we have built-in invoicing in the product as well to fulfill the end-to-end quote-to-cash process. Finally, revenue recognition. Having revenue recognition built into it is equally important because it has all the necessary data required, right from contracts, right, the state of the service delivery, because both are equally needed to recognize revenue. Because today, whether you go through based on some of the new compliance requirements, ASC 606 or IFRS 15, they all require revenue recognized based on percentage of complete, and also the corresponding any incentives to be recognized based on the percent of complete model. And all the data necessary required are built right in the system, and you don't have to leave the system to get that done. So overall, we have a comprehensive platform to deliver professional services automation, right from opportunities through RevRec, and while managing the customer delivery with a full focus on profitability, right? Again, I'll briefly go through this, is that the platform offers ability to model the service business workflow, is scalable for a global scale, and provides full automated time harvesting, and ability to connect outcomes, time to outcomes. And finally, since it's a platform, doesn't require significant customization or customization at all, and hence the lower TCO. I want to briefly discuss one of our customers who went through this process, NFC Global. They've been working with us for a couple of years now. They are a services based from in UK, and they have operations around the world. And they had a lot of data management issues to start with, without any processes. And everything that I have discussed in the 4 processes, best practices, and we were able to kind of implement all the 4 best practices that I described in the earlier part of the webinar. And today they have a streamlined process for capturing resource time, managing their resources effectively, interfacing with multiple ticketing systems, along with the data capture through other means to account for 100% of employee time. And they have a single source of truth to kind of operate on to run their overall portions of the business. They run the end-to-end business processes on Replicon PSA today, right from opportunities through project delivery and managing finances on our platform. Okay. With that, I will transition over to Rajiv to go through a solution delivery.
Thanks, Suresh. Suresh or Vivek, would you be able to confirm? Are you able to see the dashboards open okay on your side?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So hello, everybody. My name is Rajiv Borson. I'll be walking us through the actual product overview today. And really what I wanted to ensure the team was aware of today is really how Replicon can truly bust that profitability myth. So Replicon's time intelligence platform, we really provide true visibility into time as a strategic business asset, We enable better visibility into all time metrics, and in doing so can provide a clear, distinct picture around profitability. So this can include things such as billable engagements with perhaps some of your external clientele. This can also take into account non-billable time as well. And this is where we often, a number of organizations often get overlooked, really around internal business as usual aspects, administrative duties, meetings, bench time as an example. And so the Replicon platform can actually do this by helping your team harvest time information in a number of different flavors. We have mobile apps that allow your team to be able to capture time anywhere, anytime, any place through structured data as well. We can actually leverage our web services API to be able to import this type of information into our system. And really, this does provide much better visibility around the number of hours that you have with the employees within your organization. So like Suresh had mentioned, 500 employees has about 1 million hours. Every single employee has 80 hours on an annual basis. How do you really have true visibility into where all those hours have been going? Have they all been accounted for? These are all of the things that we'll be talking about today as well. And the Replicon platform really helps ensure that you are compliant with a number of different things. This can include things such as pay policies for payroll processing and really around your financial metrics, which is what we'll be talking about today. So the overview that I'll be providing today will really be focusing on a couple of different areas. I'm actually going to talk a little bit about a couple of user personas. And what the Replicon platform really does is we enable collaborative workflows throughout each of these personas within the organization. And we very often hear that this is a very disjointed process. Normally, a number of individuals are not really communicating with one another, and as a result, there's a disconnect in information which impacts your financials. So how Replicon can help here is that we'll be walking through a couple of different personas. The first thing that we'll be reviewing is what a project manager would be able to do within our system. How can they go in here, define metrics around their engagements, and more importantly, how can we staff those engagements as well? There's also a resource manager that we can satisfy the requirements for. Sometimes this may be the same individuals. Certain organizations see this as different individuals, but I'll actually walk us through what each of those folks can do within our system. They really want to have better visibility into the planning, the execution, the delivery, and the analysis of the information. And we also need to ensure that they have the ability to collaborate with individuals in finance. So I'll actually be walking us through the persona of a billing manager or a finance manager as well. These are the individuals that need to be able to log into the system, review all of that approved billable time, and be able to export it out into your financial system. So I'll walk us through that as well. And we're actually going to start from the top down today, really around profitability analysis as a whole. We very commonly hear that individuals within the leadership team within the organization, CFOs, people within finance, these are the individuals that need to be able to just get a quick overview on the health status of their business. So how can Replicon provide each of these views? So let's actually start from the top here. I'm actually going to log in as somebody who's an executive, let's say, or part of the leadership team within the organization. They're less interested in diving into some of the specific report contents, but they are interested in understanding the health status of the organization at a very high level. So what Replicon can expose to help provide that type of visibility are dashboards. And as everyone's able to see, these dashboards are very configurable. You can actually create this content, distribute it, export it, share it internally as well between different types of business units. And what's very helpful about this is that it really helps us provide true visibility onto everything that's happening within the organization. So if I'd like to be able to understand which one of my locations are the most utilized in terms of actual hours against schedules or overall utilization, we can actually provide that type of visibility, perhaps project profitability. I can see my customer billing system project is the most profitable. My fiber installation project is the least profitable. Even if I'd like to understand quarterly client billables, which one of my clients have produced the most amount of billables, these are very simple answers that we can help provide visibility into. What's helpful about this as well is that we can also provide drill down capabilities. And this is really where we allow your organization to drill into key areas that are important. So for example, I see that Advantage Technologies was my most profitable client as of Q4 of 2017. And if I were to drill into this, I'm now able to see how each of the projects have contributed to that overall billable portfolio. So I can see the customer billing system project in November 2017 was my most, the profit that had generated the most billables, followed closely by the customer billing system project. And in the event I want to drill into that, I'm now able to identify which users have contributed to each of those billables. So we can see in this case that Tammy had contributed the most. But these are some very powerful ways for us to be able to provide some key insights to your organization's financial health status. And the fact that we can actually expose these dashboards and have them available to the team is something that your team can certainly leverage within our system. So this is simply one of the areas that we can start from somebody within the leadership team before they actually pass it off to, let's say, one of the project managers within the organization. So why don't we actually cover that as the next overview today? Now that the leadership team has assessed what's going on, they'd like to now collaborate with the project managers. Now, the project and the resource managers, like I mentioned, really needs to have better visibility into planning, execution, delivery, and analysis of all of that billable time before they go ahead and collaborate with finance. So what I'm going to do is log in as one of those project managers. In this case, you'll actually notice that I've signed into the system as Anna Dell. She's an example of one of those PMs, but she's also an individual that's going to be reviewing how the hours, labor costs, and billables are underway with each one of the clients that she happens to be working with. And you'll notice that anytime any users sign into our system, they can actually get unique overviews on anything they see is relevant. So for example, maybe they'd like to also understand billables across hours, labor costs against each one of these clients and even resources as well. Perhaps they're also interested in seeing the number of projects that are underway with each one of these clients. And not only is she able to assess this very quickly, but she's also able to prioritize things. So perhaps he's interested in seeing, okay, where are we incurring the most amount of hours? I can see the Advantage Technologies project is where we are, but I can also see that they're all producing the most amount of billables as well. But we can also determine in this case that Big Game Incorporated also is incurring a significant amount of labor hours. There are more projects that are underway with this project, with this client specifically, and we can also see how any of the forecasts that we've actually compiled from a labor plan perspective is also visible here. I'll actually explain as we go through the overview today how we can marry those forecasts with actuals. That'll be part of the resource manager persona. But what I'll be doing now is actually drilling into one of these clients. So for example, let's say Borison Consulting here. We're now getting a graphical representation on all of the hours, the labor costs, and the billables, and even the resources that are underway with that particular client as well. And the whole premise of these overviews is really so that the project managers can have a graphical representation on the health status of their engagements. And of course, they can drill into areas of interest. So if they're interested in taking a look at specific projects that are underway with those clients specifically, they can go ahead and do so. Once again, they can also update their overviews to reflect things that are important to them. So perhaps they're also interested in understanding timelines on their project so I'm going to throw an end date in here, and they'd also like to assess the total contract value that's underway. So we can actually update these types of overviews to reflect exactly that. And when it comes time to drilling into projects specifically, we can also easily provide that type of visibility. So now what Anna is doing is she's taking a look at the website redesign project that's underway. Once again, we'll give the team a graphical breakdown on all of the hours, the labor cost, and billables on that particular engagement. We can actually break this out into daily, weekly, monthly, or even quarterly views. And we can also track a number of other attributes under the hood, if you will, on that project specifically. So if that website redesign project consists of different project codes, perhaps there's a particular location within the organization as to where that project resides. So even if you are a global organization, you have multiple regional offices, like Suresh had mentioned, we are a global platform. We can very easily take into account different types of currencies as an example, holiday calendars, time zones, and even languages as well. So this way, no matter where your clients or resources are located, it's very easy for them to be able to define localized metrics for every one of the users that are accessing the system. What Replicon can also do is even have the ability to define multiple clients on a single engagement. So in this example, if this particular project is actually underway with multiple clients, perhaps there's actually a weighted percentage split breakout against each one of these. So for example, Advantage Technologies is going to be taking on the majority of the billables for this particular engagement, but there's also some other clients that are going to be taking out some of the smaller allocations as well. So your organization can even define what these allocation splits can be. Of course, that is something that's optional. So if it's not applicable, we can skip over it as well. We can also define other metrics like who that project manager happens to be, other types of things like what currency are we going to be invoicing this particular engagement on, the total contract value. This is also a very important component, of course. We can actually utilize that total contract value to help us understand how much of this we need to recognize as revenue, which is another component that I'll be talking about shortly as well. Revenue recognition is one of the other areas that the Replicon platform can help provide compliance around, especially around those new accounting standards like Suresh had mentioned ASC 606, IFRS 15, and you can leverage our platform to help ensure that you're up to date with each of those standards. So we'll talk about how that all comes together. We actually have a revenue contract that's loaded, and I'll explain how it all comes together shortly. We can also allow your team to define any estimates. Of course, this can manually be done. Alternatively, this can also be completed through the resourcing that we actually have as well. So for us to be able to build out a actual labor forecast plan and then marry the actuals, which is how we're harvesting that time information against those forecasts, is a very important component for any organization. Comparing what those actuals versus estimates are can help your team stay accountable as well. We can also allow your team to upload some documentation into the system. So if there's supporting projected documentation, if I take a closer look at this statement of work that's underway, we can actually see any attributes around those particular documents as an example. So Replicon can very easily accommodate all sorts of different types of variables, not only at the project level, but also around the tasks that that particular project will consist of. So when we're actually talking about these tasks, what we very commonly see is that this is broken out into different types of deliverables that needs to be issued out for that particular engagement. So in this example, the website redesign project does consist of a few different milestones. We have the design milestone, we have a build milestone, and then we have the testing and QA milestone. And essentially what happens is that we build all of the accountabilities or tasks or subtasks that need to be completed prior to the completion of those milestones as well. We're meeting with the customers, building out some of those design specs. And of course, we can allow your team to define attributes on each one of these deliverables or milestones as well. This can include things like estimates, estimated time to completion as an example. There's a number of different attributes that we can help support to ensure that all of the relevant metrics are captured. And remember as well that your organization can leverage the Replicon API to automate this type of information. So if you already have an external system, maybe it's a project management system, maybe it's your accounting or billing system that actually already has some of these project-related metrics or cost centers, and you'd like to have that information imported into the Replicon platform. So we're simply going to be mirroring that type of data. We can also take that into consideration as well. Very straightforward on our side. Now, something to also keep in mind here is that the actual attributes around what we define as the billing contract or even the revenue contracts, and to translate what that means within your organization, this really allows us to be able to model all of the billable components on that engagement specific to your organization. So we very commonly hear customers come to us and say, I have a number of different projects that consist of a number of different things, and it's very difficult for us to be able to model this into any type of project management or time tracking system. So that's not the case with Replicon. Replicon has the ability to actually model this any way that's required. Like Suresh had mentioned, we can model any type of workflow around this, including approvals as well. So if we take a closer look at what one of these scenarios, and remember, this is very aggressively controlled through permissions in our system. So perhaps the project manager in this case, such as Anna Dell, she only has read-only access into this area, whereas somebody in finance has a little bit more access. Perhaps individuals in finance are the ones that are able to modify the attributes around those billing or revenue contracts, whereas the project managers is really tasked with just monitoring the status of the project. We can very easily control this through permissions on our system. but I did want to first give us some background around what we're looking at here. So in this case, we can actually state as an example that perhaps a certain percentage of this project will be based on time and materials. Perhaps there's actually going to be an expense markup as well. Replicon can also take into account time off or absence tracking along with expenses on these projects. So the premise of this, of course, is so that when we are actually staffing resources on those engagements, we really want to provide true visibility into availability. And if somebody's on leave, we can do so. Or even expenses as well, whether we're importing expenses into our system from external systems such as Concur, or if we are simply using Replicon's expense module, we can also accommodate that type of variable as well. And this really provides holistic overview across each one of your billables and expenses to really truly assess your total profitability portfolio. So in this example, I'm actually going to state that I have an expense markup of 30%. We're also going to model that we're going to be billing out a flat amount upon milestone completion. In this case, it'll be 5K. And I can also add any other contract clauses that I deem relevant. So if I indicate that upon project completion, I need to go ahead and bill out 10,000 as an example, these are the types of things that you can model. So everything that we're taking a look at here is completely configurable, like I mentioned earlier. This really allows your organization to be able to model exactly how that project needs to be built, all of the other attributes around that particular engagement, and more importantly, when it comes time to recognizing revenue, we can also have other attributes monitor this as well. So I have a very simple example here around percentage of completion, where we are going to be recognizing the total contract value based on the project completion. So I'll actually explain how that all comes together as well. But really what we do from the project management side is not only do we provide that true visibility around the planning, execution, delivery, and analysis, but we also allow them to be able to model all of the workflows that are relevant. And if we actually take a look at under the hood for just a moment here, like I spoke about earlier, we can also model approval workflows around each of these areas as well. So when that project manager needs to pass this information off to the finance team, perhaps there's actually multiple approvals that need to take place before that invoice gets sent out, and more importantly, before we can actually take a percentage of the work that's been completed and recognize that as revenue. So what Replicon can do to help support this is that we can build workflows around this as well. So in this case, I actually have a two-stage approval when it comes time to billing. I can also define how this workflow is going to work specifically. Maybe it's going to be a more simplistic workflow, perhaps one stage, or perhaps there's other types of workflows that I'd like to be able to take into consideration. So there's actually a number of different things that Replicon can help support here. And no matter how many different types of workflows we need to take into account, we can model that into our system. So in this scenario, we are actually going to state that anything below 10K, we can go ahead and make modifications to and go ahead and issue out straight for invoicing. However, anything above the 10K amount needs to go through special approvals. So these are the different types of approval workflows that Replicon can accommodate. This is also completely configurable as well. So no matter how complex this may look within your organization, you can turn to us to help model that. Okay, now one other quick thing I wanted to also talk about is how we can help provide visibility into resource allocation as well, because staffing is another component to any project within the organization. And whether it's the project manager that's doing it or whether it's a dedicated resource manager, you can turn to Replicon to help provide this type of visibility. And this is a very good way for us to be able to help your team understand, do I actually have resources that are available to staff these particular projects? If I'd like to be able to see exactly what Tammy is doing on a monthly basis in this case, alternatively, I can take a look at this on a daily or weekly basis as well. I can very easily assess this. And we can actually represent time in a couple of different methods, percentages or hours. And like I was describing earlier, the fact that Replicon actually has a leave management module allows us to be able to track availability. So I can actually see that I have one of my resources has leave for this given month. I can also see how resources are currently being allocated and whether or not they're actually over allocated. I can see that being the case for Tammy. Along with the actual allocations, there's also a component of skill set tracking as well. So we want to ensure that the organization is staffing the most appropriate resource based on the requirements of that project against the skill set of that user. And where Replicon can help provide visibility here, if we take a closer look at Tammy as an example to see what types of skills she has assigned, is that we can really help your team understand things like what types of skills have produced the most amount of billables, what types of skills have incurred the most amount of labor costs, where from a capacity planning perspective do we need to consider staffing for based on our project pipeline. These are the types of questions that Replicon can help provide visibility into as well. So you can turn to us to help provide really end-to-end visibility around project and resourcing needs across each one of your engagements within the organization. Now, the next part that I wanted to also review, now that we've spoken about how the project managers have pretty much completed what they need to do, is what we can expose for individuals in finance or billing. So I'm actually going to visit this next overview, and really what it comes time to somebody in finance, they want to be able to review the billable hours that has been submitted within the system. They want to go ahead and close out financial periods. They want to go ahead and execute some invoicing within the system. And we also need to ensure that they can recognize the appropriate aspects of that project from a revenue perspective. So we'll actually walk through how that works today. You'll actually notice that Robert, California is an example of somebody that has that type of visibility. He actually has access into a billing workbench where he can actually get an overview of all of that approved billable time in the system. We can also expose a couple of different views for individuals in finance to understand and assess what's happening from a cash flow perspective. For example, if he actually takes a look at a billing summary overview here, he's actually able to quickly assess across each one of the clients that are underway, which one of these clients have not yet been invoiced, which one of these clients have invoices that might be sitting in a draft or a draft status, which ones have actually been issued, which ones have been paid. Of course, he can take a look at this over any given time period. So you may have different clients that you need to actually invoice different time periods for. We can very easily take that into consideration. And very similar to all of the other views that we were visiting earlier, we can also provide the capability for individuals in finance to update their overviews to reflect anything they think is relevant. So in this case, perhaps he's interested in taking a look at all of the actual labor cost, hours, what's been paid and sitting in that draft status, and he can actually update his overviews to reflect exactly that. So this is a very good way for individuals in finance to at least get a cash flow overview on what's happening across each one of the clientele. And when it comes time for them to actually passing things off to the accounting or billing system, they can go ahead and do so. So if we visit that billing workbench like I was talking about earlier, perhaps we want to go ahead and start billing out for a particular client, such as Advantage Technologies. And perhaps we want to go ahead and first of all, see what projects are underway with that client specifically. I'm now interested in taking a look at the sales enablement project. I'd like to go ahead and issue this out for billing. So I'm going to go ahead and update my overviews to reflect that. And perhaps there's other types of attributes that I'd like to be able to update into my overview here. For example, what was the billing rates that were corresponding to each one of these billable components? I can easily update that as well. And when it comes time to actually billing or setting this up for invoicing, we can now indicate exactly which one of these we'd like to go ahead and bill. So we'll keep it simple for now. We're going to go ahead and issue out a few of the different line items for this project specifically. And when it comes time to billing those particular line items, I can go ahead and do so, at which point we're going to be triggering the billable approval workflows that we spoke about earlier. So we can actually see in this case that these are actually waiting in that submitted status now. I can go ahead and execute the actual approval workflow. Some of these are actually ready for invoicing. I can also very quickly assess which ones are currently outstanding and awaiting my responsibility versus anybody else within the organization. So we can actually clearly differentiate and hold accountability to individuals in finance to ensure that they have the visibility they require. Very similarly, once again, they can go ahead and take a look at specific clients or projects or statuses that they'd like to go ahead and invoice for. But if I go ahead and state as an example that I'm ready to go to submit these particular line items, I'm now actually seeing that these are waiting approval statuses, and I can actually review how the approval workflows need to look. So these do fall below the 10K amounts, and as a result of this, we can go ahead and approve this. Remember as well, of course, that for simplicity's sake, I'm actually speeding through the approvals today. Robert is considered a super user in the system. However, this would typically need to go off to other individuals within the organization. Replicon can dispatch notifications from our system on multiple regards, whether it's projects when it comes to billing to each of the individual users so that they have the appropriate visibility that they require to be able to take the necessary actions. But if I go ahead and indicate that I'm ready to approve these out, I've now completed that and it's now been ready for invoicing. And now if I take a look at the actual invoicing area, I can not only leverage the Replicon platform to be able to issue out those invoices, but I can also go ahead and start recognizing certain aspects of this for revenue. And I'll actually visit that shortly as well. But if I go ahead and add an invoice within the system here, I'm actually going to indicate what that invoice number is. This is the number that we will actually be pushing off to your billing system. We can now state that for Advantage Technologies, which is the one that I had pulled in those line items for, of course, you can indicate any of the clients that we're going to be tracking for you. We're going to be pulling in attributes around that particular client as well. For example, the date of issue, what currency that particular client needs to be invoiced at, billing address, or anything else that's relevant. So I'm going to go ahead and start indicating which line items I'd like to go ahead and include for invoicing for this client specifically. And when we take a look at all of the available options, here's all of the items that we've actually approved off for billing. I'm going to go ahead and add that into this particular invoice. And what we also give the team the ability to do is make the appropriate changes. So if they need to be able to override certain items, add additional items, for example, service admin fees that I'd like to be able to throw in here, and we're going to be making a small deduction to take that into account of -500, I can take that into account. And we pretty much give all of the capability for individuals in finance to do what they have to do. They can also communicate any notes, whether it's internal or external. And when it comes time to actually issuing this out, they can actually preview exactly how this is going to look. Of course, we will update this with your company information, your payment instructions as well. All of that is very straightforward on our side. Alternatively, this could also be the staging environment before we pass this off into the accounting system. So we can accommodate both, leveraging that API that I was talking about earlier, but you certainly have some options around how this needs to work. Your accounting system can also inform us, or billing system in this case, if it's been issued and if payment has been made, and we can actually track that as well. And this is essentially what updates all of the reports on the Replicon side. And when it comes time to actually recognizing revenue, this is another very important component for the accounting standards we spoke about earlier. We give the ability for individuals in finance to be able to do this. They can actually state, as of certain dates, let's say as of June 9th, I'd like to be able to review anything that needs to be ready for revenue recognition. Let's actually move this along instead. I can actually see that for these 3 projects, all of the amounts that I've recognized as of that particular date, but I can also understand how much is still recognizable. So this is a very good way for us to be able to state, okay, here's how much I know that needs to be recognized. I'm going to go ahead and create a revenue run now. And essentially what will happen is that the revenue run is where we provide the ability for individuals in finance to be able to override certain things. So maybe I need to change this to a different amount. Maybe I need to go ahead and export this out into my accounting system. So what will happen now is that we give a staging environment for individuals in finance to be able to review, finalize what needs to be sent out to accounting. And then what we do is we can produce that extract. Of course, this will be formatted according to the necessary import specifications to your accounting system. But as everyone's able to see, we can create direct workflows across each of the systems within the organization. There really doesn't even need to be any user intervention that's required, but we can also provide and facilitate the environments around individuals in finance to be able to facilitate that prior to that export occurring as well. So as everyone's able to see, the Replicon Time Intelligence platform really allows your organization to have a single source of truth around all time and service metrics, breaking that profitability myth. We enable collaborative workflows across multiple business units and teams within your organization, really all the way from planning to the execution, delivery, analysis, the collaboration with finance for billing. We really provide end-to-end workflows around project planning through resource management to help build those labor forecast plans, really provide true visibility into project burn down status, intelligent time harvesting, as well, while ensuring data quality and ensuring intelligent approval routing, streamlined workflows into your billing or accounting system by leveraging our web services. And in doing so, we truly bring transparency and then accountability, help increase profitability, decrease labor costs, and help bust that profitability myth. So that concluded what I wanted to show the team today. Thank you, everyone. I'll actually be passing it back to Suresh for closing comments.
Thank you, Rajiv. One second. Thank you, Rajiv. Just to wrap up, based on our customers' case studies that we have done, our platform has provided many benefits to plug revenue leakages, improve resource utilization, as well as significantly reduce the manual overhead or administrative overhead that goes into managing the end-to-end the processes, right? What we have seen is that we have seen up to 10% decrease in revenue leakages, 5 to 10% improvement in resource utilization, and up to 90% decrease in administrative overheads. I think they all add up, right, to move the needle on the profitability curve. Obviously, employee engagement, it's hard to put a number on it, but with the overall compliances reduced, I think the platform provides enough ROI for professional services organization to get the profitability improved from the service delivery projects. With that, we have come to the end of the webinar, and we are open to any questions you might have. Thanks for listening.